이조, 이어제, 이야.
아오이 파.
Did you know that Lego Ninjago, out of all things, had its own Conlang? Well, they do. Klingon from Star Trek, Navi from Avatar, and Elvish from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. All of these languages, they add a lot of depth to the stories they're put inside of. And if you want to add that kind of depth to your story or world building project, well, this is the video for you. And you're in good hands. Because I did exactly that the past month. And right now, I'm going to teach you how to make a Conlang, how not to make a Conlang, what things to consider, and how to optimize it for your world. Let's deep dive right now with a Sure You Can. Where do you start? Well, that's such a simple question with a really simple answer, which is an idea. Yeah, what idea? Well, an idea of what you want your language to evolve into, and more specifically, in our context of world building and novel writing, an idea of who the creatures who speak this language are, and an idea of what they want featured in the language. So, I'm gonna give you two examples, one of an alien race and another of Chinese. I know they sound very unrelated, but we'll get there and you'll understand it and it'll click really nicely. Okay, so let's start with the example of the alien race. Now, you know that languages, we speak them out to each other, right? But there could, in theory, be an alien race that can communicate by means of light, which is different parts of the visible spectrum could be letters in its language. Not even just the visible spectrum, the whole spectrum of light, it could use that to communicate with an other member of its species. Say for example, A could be ultraviolet, and B could be infrared, and C could be somewhere beyond that, and D could be the entire visible spectrum. We don't really know because we haven't seen that, but it is theoretically possible. You get the idea, right? So you have to consider the creature you're designing the language for very much. Now we can take a look at this in our own world as well with the Orcanes. You can think about that yourself. So let's go on to the next example of Chinese. So you see this letter here, Fei. That's what it's written as. Fei is the Chinese letter for fly, and the kids who look at the letter will immediately notice the wings, and as a result, they'll be able to associate faster, and as a result, they'll learn the language faster. And you know what that leads to? Learning more complex concepts faster, and the brain will develop accordingly to that. And now we know why Chinese is smarter than the rest of the world. It's just a matter of their language. You can also say that for Japanese people, Cantonese people, or Sumetrians if you want to go back to the old ages. Yeah, exactly. Now, the first two things, if you take them together, and if you look at who this language was made for, as well as what they want featured in this language, you will get a decent idea of where to start. And the next thing you ought to do is develop a system to store information, which could be in the form of an alphabet or in the form of whatever, based on your species. We're going to look at how to do that now. Encoding information. It's actually a pretty easy thing to do. Why did I choose these two words instead of saying making the alphabet? Well, because there are multiple ways to encode information. Like take for example, making a voice recorder. instead of actually scribbling cryptic symbols on a wall and calling it a day. You could also take a different approach at this. What if there were creatures that used light to communicate? What if the colors doubled as letters and equivalents of sounds? That's also possible, right? I mean, there are so many different ways of encoding information, and we're gonna talk about one in specific now, the written and spoken forms of them. So let's take a look at both of them now. Okay, so for actually speaking the language, you need the letters to sound pleasant and stuff. That totally depends on your people who speak the language as well. Like, say for example, the people or creatures who speak that language have different organs than us. They can make more sounds than us. And if you want to know how these sounds function, you can first learn the IPA chart. There's one for consonants and there's one for vowels. We'll get there, but I want to talk about the different types of ways humans have accomplished putting these sounds together and making letters out of them, okay? The first is the hiragana and katakana of Japanese. So they have different columns where consonants and vowels are put together and are written together. Say for example, I wanted to say she. In English, that's 3 letters, S-H-I, right? In Japanese, that's one damn letter. And it's written like this, I guess. No, like this. Screw it, I forgot. Japanese letters are really hard to read because they're kind of complex and they get mirrored inside of my head. Okay, now that that's out of the way, we can actually look at how the letters are made. In Japanese, at least, all of the letters evolved from a pre-existing script. Like, if you look at the history of the people who speak your language, you'll get a nice idea. But they're colonized by some people, and they have to take this language, and do they have to upgrade it, or do they want to make their own language? Now, the next thing you've got to look at when you're picking sounds is who the people who speak your language are. Are they like the French and want to sound fancy? Like, le monsieur. That means, lady, my old friend. I guess that's all I know about French. Okay. Or is it spoken by brutes? Like, drtoro, ra, fig fa. Does it sound like that? If you understand these two things, you'll be able to pick sounds well. The IPA chart has a lot of sounds a human can and cannot make in it, and when you take a look at that, you'll get a nice idea of how you can essentially create your sounds. It's pretty easy as well. Now let me explain. The left to right column, that's essentially how deep in your throat your tongue is. Like, R is deep into my throat and P is right on my lips. Now, there are plosives, trills, tabs, all of these things. I think they sound pretty intuitive, but let me try to help you a little bit just so that you get the gist. P is a plosive. P is a mini explosion. And that's why it's an explosive sound. And an approximant is you trying to approximate that. Like a yeah. Or something else similar to that. If you take a look at a fricative, it's basically you pushing air through your lips. Like a fa, fa, fa. Or a la, no, la, la. Get me? V, L, F. These are fricatives. Once you start getting the idea of the IPA chart, you'll be able to add phonetics to your language and make sure to choose sounds that are good, okay? Because nobody wants piglin brutes everywhere, unless your language is for piglin brutes. Okay, anyways, let's move on to the next part. How do you make him letters? Well, it's pretty simple. When you're making letters, all you've got to consider is essentially the architecture and the clothing that the people do there and their culture in general. For example, the Greeks like swirlies a lot, so they made their alphabets pretty swirly. This is the sign for alpha, right? This is an alpha. It's very swirly because the Greeks like swirlies. And once you understand this, you'll be able to make really good sounds and stuff. Now know how letters are made, and you now know how sounds are picked for those letters, right? Now let's take a look at an even weirder writing system, a logogrammary. In Chinese, the logogrammary is essentially the collection of logos inside of the language. You can draw a bull if you need a bull. You can draw this weird horse. Wait, I forgot how to draw it. Ah, shit. I'll just put a picture of it on screen. The horse is drawn that way, and the eye was drawn this way, and then it became like this. And it just pretty much goes on like that. Now let's talk about the next thing, which is making root words. Root words and grammar. This is the last topic we'll be speaking with each other about today. And what we're going to talk about is essentially root words first. So, what are root words? Well, they're the smallest unit of an idea in the context of a sentence that can stand without a crutch. Like, say for example, in the word worked, ed cannot exist without work, but work can exist without ed. Well, ed can exist without work, but that's in a different context. We're talking about a different context now. So, I guess you can make sense of it. So, if you want to make your own root words, there are a lot of different ways. And the easiest ones that are pulled off by humans is this idea of a logo system. In logo systems, that everything is a morpheme, every letter per se, and these letters just go together to make words of meaning. For say for example, I wanted yesterday. So I put together the letter for past, and I put together the letter for day. So past day would be yesterday. You get me? Well, I believe you do. And once you have something like this set up inside of your language, you can use root words in a way where they just smash together and they create meaning, or just in a way like English, where you have suffixes and affixes and you have to put all of them together to essentially make a word. You can create it in both of these ways. One is more efficient than the other in certain contexts, but it really doesn't matter. It depends on the people of your world. Now, to make root words, that is another tip I could give you, which is essentially to know that there are genders in language. Like, English doesn't have genders in it, but other languages do. Like, take for example, Sanskrit. Yeah, in Sanskrit, even a pen has a gender, and a door has a gender, and door hinges have a gender, which is weird, but a lot of languages do it. I think it must have been spread from the Norse people, because historically they were known to be a little dumber than the other ones. Okay. Let's now continue with grammar. Grammar is essentially a very essential component of language. You see, there are sentence structures which are, structures you put a sentence in. And the most common one is subject, verb, object, because it conveys causality. The idea is, the subject is the thing that you're going to be talking about. Like, I want to eat the food means that I is the subject and food is the object, which means subject, verb, object is the grammatical sentence there. But there are other sentence structures as well, like I food eat. That is found in a lot of other languages. Like in Tamil, you said, Naan unavu saapidugiraen, something like that. And that will be like, Naan is a subject, and unavu is the object, and saapidugiraen is the verb. Do you get me? Well, you probably do. So, I'll continue to the next idea. In grammar, you shouldn't just make random rules that sound cool, okay? You have to think about the people who are using it. How have they simplified the language in such a way that it is concise and clear to them? Clear to them. Huge thing. Because when some people use a language for long enough, some words are flipped on their heads. Like, some people stop pronouncing certain letters as well. And some people just start writing out of grammar. Like, for example, American rappers. They just speak however the hell they want. They ignore all the rules of grammar and they just speak like that. However, it clarifies itself in the context of it. And do note that there are languages without the idea of tense as well. For example, the Thai language does not have tenses. It's not that the people can't understand the idea of tense, it's more so that they didn't find the need to put it in there. So let's stop there right before we, bash Thai people for making a language that's working. Now we're going to talk about nothing more, because that's literally all there is to making a language. Making root words, making grammar, and learning about sentence structures, and making yourself a lettering system. We'll meet in a different video where I'll essentially do something else, like talk about my world building projects. If you're interested in all of those, I've already made a language, and the playlist will be put right on screen as the end screen approaches. You can take a look at all of them. If you found this video to be informative and educational as per my trials, well, then go ahead and subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stuff like this. My name is Monish, channel's name is Monstar. If you're interested in any of the stuff I do here, like my creative projects, or just my rants about certain things, or my educational videos, then yeah, join us. Bye.